Have you heard? Amazon is now hiring for their new site opening soon in New Albany. Be one of the first to take advantage of launching a new career at one of the best workplaces in the world. Being a part of Amazon includes great benefits and competitive pay, plus many opportunities for advancement. So get a new job today and kickstart a new career tomorrow. Learn more about the perks of working at a new Amazon site. Go to amazon.com/start now. Amazon is proud to be an equal opportunity employer.
Hi, I've got a prescription for diabetes test strips. How much is the copay?
That could take me a while to calculate. In the meantime, you should think about over-the-counter Contour Next test strips. You get 35 for $19.99, and they're highly accurate. For full details, visit contournext.com/radio.
Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mason. Today's episode is really cool. We're talking to Renan Ozturk and Freddie Wilkinson about their recent adventure in Alaska and film that came out. The adventure was a few years ago, but the film came out last year, The Sanctity of Space. But you might know Renan's name from some other projects. He's an artist, he's a filmmaker, and a professional climber. He has been involved, very well known as the first ascent of the shark's fin route on Meru in the Himalayas, which was with Jimmy Chin and Conrad Anker back in 2011. And that was documented in the documentary Meru, which came out in 2015, which kind of led the way to Free Solo, Alex Honnold's film. And so Renan is legendary. Freddie, I didn't know as much about, but his stories were awesome. Such a great storyteller, such a great communicator. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was a little bit muffled. The audio kind of went out. It was three-way Wi-Fi videos, people coming from all over the country. So we were all spread out. And so it didn't come through great all the time. But if you can work through that, it's a great conversation. And yeah, this was awesome. And so The Sanctity of Space is about Renan and Freddie's adventure on the Moose's Tooth Massif, kind of almost a sheet of mountains, like this curtain of mountains that you traverse, and it's following the Washburns, Bradford Washburn, the famous Alaskan photographers, expedition from way back in the day, like back in the 50s, this experience, and they're filming it and showcasing it and telling the story of Bradford, who was very accomplished mountaineer and photographer, and also his wife Barbara, who was the first woman up Denali to summit Denali, all kinds of stuff. They're graduates of Harvard. They're just legendary people. And so the film that we're talking about goes into that story, as well as Renan and Freddie's climb of the Moose's Tooth Massif. So I hope you enjoy, and I hope you continue to support our sponsor, Gnarly Nutrition. And let's go ahead and jump in. All right, folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. You heard a little bit about Renan and Freddie's story in the intro, but I wanted to welcome them to the show. Welcome to the show, y'all.
Thanks for having us, Mason.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I always ask this first, always, and that is, where are you coming from? And if that's not home, where is home for you?
Well, I'm in Colorado, not too far away from you, on the western slope here out of Telluride, which is home for me. This is Renan.
Hey, this is Freddie, and I'm in Madison, New Hampshire, right on the outskirts of the White Mountains, and that's home for me.
Oh, awesome. We've got all over the place. And I'm actually in Florida right now, of all places, so not in Colorado. So we kind of got the country triangulated pretty much. But I want to kind of just jump in and learn more about this story. Where did the idea for The Sanctity of Space come from, in the sense of, like, when did you know this would be a story to film? And also, how did y'all connect over this? I mean, there's always a story there.
Sure, Mason. Maybe I'll just jump in first, and then I'll hand off to Renan in a little bit. And because there really is a sort of a story behind the story in this case, and it began back in the early mid-2000s when Renan and I were both kind of young climbers wrapping up, school and sort of, various side careers and finding our paths. And we both were really attracted to Alaska and mountains around Denali. And we made trips there, separately with different partners, kind of beginning around like 2004, 2005, got to know each other a little bit. And, as climbers often do, we started kind of scheming of like, oh, hey, what's a cool big adventure we might team up on. And I had sort of had this idea about the Moose's Tooth Massif, and it was, partly born from a lot of the aerial photography, and we can talk more about this, I'm sure, that I had seen that was basically a traverse of the whole mountain Massif. And I shared that idea with Renan and another friend of ours, Zach Smith, probably around, well, let me see, it's in the movie, it's in 2008, 2009. And then, lots of adventure happened after that. But that's sort of the origin story, if you will.
Yeah, and a lot of people ask, when does a climb turn into becoming a film? It's pretty, at first in a lot of these endeavors, you're not sure if it's worthy to make a film. There's plenty of climbing movies that show suffering, stuff on Everest, films that we've been a part of and made even ourselves, like Mirror and whatnot. And I think the thing that really pushed us further to really want to make this is Washburn's story beyond anything else, because we felt like it was incredible. We were discovering his story as we were making it and uncovering footage that had never been digitized before, when Freddie was traveling around to the Boston Museum of Science and the Museum of the North, getting these old tapes, and we'd get one back and you'd see these images of Washburn as a psyched young man doing these incredible endeavors that blended first defense and cutting edge exploration, but then also with documentation and the sharing of it. And it really paralleled what we were doing at the time in trying to bring back images from the Alaska range. And it just clicked that moment.
How much did you know about Washburn ahead of time? I know he's legendary, him and his wife, but was there a lot of familiarity there, or was it constantly just learning more and coming across his story?
I think my experience, and I think this maybe speaks to like a lot of people's sort of interactions with history, right? It's like Washburn was this figure who, to me as a young climber, he was kind of always like in the background. Like, you walk into the National Park building and there's that big, beautiful photo hanging. And it's like, oh, that's a Brad Washburn photo. Or, you're flipping through the guidebook and you're like, oh, there's a photo of Brad doing the first descent of this climb. So he sort of was there in the background of my understanding of the climbing community and kind of the climbing history of Alaska. But at the same time, I had never read a biography of him from start to finish. So I didn't really know what made him such a dynamic guy until we really, started getting obsessed on, by the climb and learning more about him to make a film.
Yeah, I didn't know much of anything about Washburn, but the second you dig in, you realize that he's could have been famous on the same level as Ansel Adams or Amelia Earhart for any single thing that he did, but he did so many different things that for some reason he flew under the radar and wasn't as big of a historic figure as maybe he should have been.
Wow. Yeah, literally flew under the radar sometimes. What was there a fact about him or his wife, Barbara, that maybe stood out and said, yes, we've got to cover this? Because like you said, first thing I thought of when I'm researching him was Ansel Adams. This is very, similar time, similar photography in the sense of just awesome landscapes. But why have I never heard about this person in this family? I've probably come across and read things, but it just didn't stick the same way that some other folks at the time have. So was there something in particular that made it say, we've got to do this?
Well, I think one thing, Mason, is I think the three of us are having this conversation and talking about how Brad's kind of this undiscovered character, but that is in part sort of, I think, a generational thing. And in his day, he was very well known. He was not shy about giving interviews and talking about himself and, creating his own legacy. So that should probably be mentioned. But the thing that really drew me to him is that a lot of the times the people we really celebrate are like just these unparalleled like masters at one singular thing. And Ansel Adams always told this story, like he realized he could be a great pianist or he could be a great photographer, but he could only do one of those things and he had to sacrifice. And so he gave up being a professional pianist just to be a photographer. And Washburn was a true polymath in that, like, he never thought or he had to sacrifice. And he wanted to be making a map, climbing a mountain, shooting a beautiful photograph, and writing a book about it or an article for Life magazine all at the same time. And, for me personally as a creative, I just, that's more where my kind of heart and soul is at. I'm way more of a, do everything at once kind of a guy. So that's what drew me to him.
Yeah, I guess just the stories we were starting to uncover. I think Freddie showed me a letter when he was writing back and forth with Ansel Adams, and they were arguing about the nature of landscape photography. And Washburn was saying they needed a figure in the landscape to show a sense of scale, because he's often in these massive landscapes in the Alaska range. And Ansel Adams is saying, no, it has to be pure. And there are so many of those stories and interactions that felt like people could really connect to. I mean, that one's not even in the film, but yeah, there's the Amelia Earhart one in the film, and a lot of others. It's kind of as an endless well of both archival material and just interactions that we felt a general audience could connect to and help define what exploration is moving forward, because I think the waters are getting a little muddied right now with all of the kind of adrenaline-based adventure content of wingsuiters flying through like tiny keyholes in mountains and things like that.
Yeah, that's definitely can be enticing when you see the attention some of those extreme things get. But yeah, going back to just kind of the multifacetedness of Washburn, I thought it was just ridiculously cool that Barbara was the first woman to summit Denali and was almost apprehensive about climbing in the first place, but also that Bradford was a graduate of Harvard, had 9 honorary doctorates, and he was a direct descendant of folks from the Mayflower. And I just think, holy crap, there's so many things that could make this person and his wife famous. It's almost ridiculous how much there is to kind of get into.
Yeah, a colorful personality for sure. When I talk about the film or when I was pitching the film, I sort of described him as like a real life Indiana Jones, because he had a day job that was very respectable, and he wore a suit and tie and was, director of a nonprofit museum, Boston Museum of Science, which, if you're not from Boston or the Northeast, the Boston Museum of Science is pride of the city sort of thing. And so he was hobnobbing with senators and, local dignitaries. And then on the weekends, he'd put on his proverbial fedora hat and go climb a mountain or hang out the door of an airplane. And that was something we wanted to capture in the film, just how many different things he had his hands in, I guess you could say.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
When you look at the vastness of the work and the legacy of the Washburns, obviously, I'm sure, Denali being a big part of Barbara's story and just what she was famous for, was there kind of the draw to focus on Denali? Why the Moose's Tooth Massif over some other areas and that they have photographed over the years?
Well, that was just kind of the intersection with our story, since the film is sort of based on us seeing this creative line that goes sideways across the Moose's Tooth Massif on Brad's photo. And that really is kind of the iconic skyline of Alaska that a lot of things are named after. If you go to Anchorage or you go to Talkeetna, there's the things are named after the Moose's Tooth or the Bear's Tooth, all things on that spiky skyline. And it was Brad's, I think, true love. And there's another part that's not in the film that's really interesting in the sense of what we were talking about earlier as well, is that he never admitted that he's an artist. And in this day and age where everybody and their brother are an artist, quote unquote, posting Instagram photos or TikTok creators, and that is its own art form. But to the end of his days, Kurt Marcus, who's in the film, tried to get it out of him and say, like, you were an artist, you were trying to create art. He would never admit it. But I think he had this thing where he did absolutely just love Denali National Park and flying in what we call the magic light. And his photos will stand the test of time. And that's the cross section with our story. And it just made a lot of sense.
And also, the Great Gorge of the Ruth Glacier is a geologic feature that's really, really special and unique. It's bigger in terms of proportions than the Grand Canyon, biggest gorge in North America, so they say. And it was something that fascinated Washburn as a geophysicist and an earth scientist, not only a climber. So, and that's right, part of the Moose's Tooth is the Moose's Tooth rises from the Great Gorge.
Unbelievable. That is awesome. Yeah.
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 So why do you think he was apprehensive about calling himself an artist? Do you think it was a point of pride, or was it a product of the time? Was artists look differently then? Like, what do you think it was? Humility?
Yeah. I mean, Freddie's kind of the historian of the group here, but I think it seemed like, it was just more of like a prideful thing to be a scientist and contribute hard knowledge to the understanding of Earth, rather than just like have something that stood as art itself. And like we were just talking about the Ruth Gorge, like he was the first one to map the depth of it at 4,000 feet thick. So those walls are going down that deep under the glacier, and they rise up much higher than walls in Yosemite from there. And then just everywhere he went, he added to the body of knowledge. And that we were calling that, the search for knowledge. And that kind of is this endless process. And I think for him, photos themselves maybe didn't contribute to that as much as the hard facts. But the irony of it is that, especially for me, seeing the beauty of his photos are what drew me in to the story, and why we even made the film in the first place, even though that's not what he was after.
So fascinating. Yeah, there's I would love to see a 3D rendering, or maybe an artist's kind of expression of what that area would look like without the snow, like how amazing those rock walls would be, like Yosemite. It's just, there's no glacier, there's nothing there, just what it would look like. I hope we don't ever get to see that, literally, but it would be neat to just for perspective, kind of like the 90% of an iceberg you don't get to see because it's underwater. That'd be really cool. Does that exist? Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. I'd like to introduce you to our newest sponsor, Gnarly Nutrition. I know you've heard about them recently because we've had some guests on recently that credits Gnarly for helping them do the adventures that we talk about on this show. So Chris Fisher was one who did the Vert Max. He did 400,000 feet of elevation gain in a month. Check out that episode. That was not too far back. And he credits Gnarly Nutrition for keeping his body literally sustained during that time, just packing in the calories. It's amazing nutrition for anyone doing anything adventure, endurance-based, whether that's in the mountains or bike packing or whatever. It's a great thing to have with you prior to an adventure training and also during an adventure. And also Jason Hardrath, who recently did the 100 fastest known times. He did 100 mountains in 50 days and just was slamming Gnarly Nutrition. He also credits Gnarly for essentially keeping his body sustained. And so Gnarly Nutrition has been around since 2008. They were born in Utah's Wasatch Mountains, and they are committed to educating and inspiring athletes of all levels to be as nutritionally sound as possible. Their nutrition supplements are certified by NSF and have science-backed products free of hormones, free of GMOs, proprietary blends, and nothing artificial. So Gnarly is going to help you get ready and help you sustain during those huge adventure efforts. So if you're looking for the best tasting and the most trusted sports nutrition brand for any endurance athletes, go to GoGnarly, and that is GNARLY.com, and use the code GNARLYADventure15 for 15% off. And just, a personal plug here. I love Gnarly. I love the folks there. They're doing such a fantastic job. They have been so great to work with. They helped provide some products for our Journey to 100 film series that we were doing giveaways with at the end of every film screening. So it's been a pleasure to work with them so far. So if you'd like to support the folks that are supporting this show, definitely go visit GoGnarly.com. Hey folks, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Any adventure is going to have a lot of twists and turns going on. Those are going to cause a lot of ups and downs, and is not life the exact same way? And so sometimes we need a therapist to talk to get through some of that stuff. I use a therapist. I call them on the phone pretty regularly. A lot of times for me, adventure is my therapy. But sometimes there's just something I got to talk about that adventure can't handle, or I don't have enough adventures going on to really take care of that self-care. So I often use a therapist. So if you are looking for a therapist, or you just need a licensed professional therapist to talk to that is going to be more affordable than traditional in-person or offline therapy, check out BetterHelp. Also, BetterHelp makes it super easy to get financial aid, to change therapists if you don't quite click, or to message them if you need to set something up. And you can give them a call through video or just a phone call anywhere in the world. You can set up weekly stuff. It's pretty cool how flexible and how helpful it actually is. So if you want to give BetterHelp a shot, go to betterhelp.com/adventuresports for 10% off your first month of online therapy. Again, that's betterhelp.com/adventuresports. That's one word, all caps, adventure sports. Hey folks, I've got a great new podcast for you. Reunion is a beautiful island filled with rich culture, great food, incredible beaches, and the world's deadliest shark attacks. It all started in 2011 when sharks on Reunion just started biting people, and with a crazy amount of violence. The Reunion Island shark crisis became one of the most extreme shark attack epidemics in recorded history. So how did the locals, government, and business owners navigate all this? This season of Reunion, Shark Attacks in Paradise, will tell you the remarkable stories of the people who lived through these attacks and how the island was reacting. So why was this happening, and how has this complicated problem seeped into the culture of the island? Join host, pro surfer, and best-selling author Dan Duane on his trip to Reunion Island as he seeks answers to these questions. So listen to Reunion, Shark Attacks in Paradise on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you get your podcasts, and subscribe to binge all episodes, which are out now. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
It's coming. Really cool, actually, that you asked that question, Mason, because Washburn, and this speaks to part of his legacy, as he got older in life, he sort of carved out this niche for himself as being sort of the godfather of different expeditions and scientific studies, where he'd find a group of young scientists or climbers and kind of suggest a good idea to them and then send them out into the field and see what they come up with. And one of those endeavors was working with some young scientists. I believe they were glaciologists from University of Alaska Fairbanks, don't quote me on that. And they went out, measured how thick the ice was in the Great Gorge. And that was like conducted in the 1980s, 1990s. Those same guys have gone back just this spring with modern state-of-the-art technology and resurveyed it just, I believe it was this May, like last month. And so, it'll take probably another year for them to figure out what the data means, but I would expect that like that cool 3D rendering you're asking about, maybe something that's possible in the future.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
That would be really cool. Maybe Renan would be able to do a painting of that then, what it might look like.
Yeah, I mean, we've done even the Nat Geo Everest project that we did a couple of years ago with another friend from the New Hampshire area looking for the body of Sandy Irvin to try to solve the mystery of who first climbed Everest, because it's still kind of under question. It was all based on a Washburn photo that he took out of a, what was the plane, Freddie? Wasn't it like a spy plane or something?
That was a Learjet.
Learjet, yeah. And the mysteries and the knowledge that his photographs uncovered are still fueling all these kinds of things. And it's crazy how much it lives on. Since we have this archive of aerial footage of the Alaska Range with this gyro-stabilized camera system that you saw in the film, it's kind of one of a kind. We hope to eventually just kind of put that out there for folks wanting to use it to make films in the name of conservation and pass it on, much like Washburn did.
Wow. Well, speaking of that, I would love to hear, there's this amazing photo of the moose's tooth where, you look at it by itself and it looks like, how could anything be bigger than this or more epic or more awesome? And then there's this amazing photo of the moose's tooth with Denali in the background. And it's like, holy crap, you forget that it's like a third of the size. And despite how epic it is, that Denali is just massive in the background, which is so cool because so many films, so many projects are focused on the biggest, the largest, the best, the highest. The 14ers in Colorado, for instance, get so much hype that people forget there's almost 700 13ers just as epic and probably a better experience because you're all alone. What was it like at the top? What was it like looking around from that point of view, not being the biggest thing, but being on an epic adventure?
Well, I would say that often, like when you're on the biggest thing, it's not the most stunning viewpoint. And what's so incredible about the Tooth Traverse and the Moose's Tooth skyline is you're on one of the most incredible skylines that you're looking across at the west side lineup of the Great Gorge, which is, as Freddie said, the largest gorge in North America, even bigger than the Grand Canyon. And you have these walls lining up that are all bigger than El Cap that are just, one of the most stunning views. And then above that, you have Denali, this behemoth rising up that commands the clouds. And you really have like the best view, or what we like to think is one of the best views in the Alaska Range that you're staring at all day. This constantly moving painting as you're also drawing this line with your own body across the top of the landscape. And that wasn't lost on us, even in the hardest moments of the climb where we should have been suffering. We could just collapse in exhaustion and look across at Denali in that west side lineup and really appreciate where we were and the privilege it took to get there, and like all of the skills that we had worked so hard in life to learn, to be able to do that safely, and just kind of experience the wonder of it. And that was a big part of the film for us, is showing that joy of climbing rather than the suffering and the danger, which of course is always there. But that's really the heart of it for us.
Awesome.
A couple things that make Alaska, the gorge special to me is that not at high altitude, which is an underappreciated characteristic of a lot of Alaska alpinism. I think you don't have to, acclimatize and then, be up there performing hard technical stuff with at above 20,000 feet where there's not a lot of oxygen. You can be breathing, relatively thick air. The moose's tooth is like just a shade under 11,000 feet tall. And it's kind of infamous for not having the greatest rock. And that's true. But it's also as like granitic rock. It's just not the sketchiest rock quality you could have out there either. And so, it's hard climbing, but you don't feel like you're going to die. And that actually, for me, is the sweet spot in having a nice, enjoyable climb.
Yeah. I personally, I love feeling like I'm not going to die. I strive for that, honestly, most day-to-day circumstances. But
yeah. I'm being cheeky, but it was it was a goal of ours from the beginning to, so often if you're in climbing media or say you're making a documentary about climbing, you end up getting stuck in these story imperatives where, it's got to be about risking life and limb and, are they going to live or is he going to die? That's kind of the central question that drives a lot of storytelling. We wanted to make a movie that wasn't like, are they going to live or are they going to die? It was more like, check out how really rad and beautiful this is along the way.
Totally. That it's not a sustainable place to be as a filmmaker. If you're on that edge all the time, you're not going to be making too many films. Speaking of that, I want to know too, from studying the old pictures from Washburn and just kind of those images from long ago, did you notice anything different being there in person as far as changes to the landscape, or what kind of things did you notice that weren't the same?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. You can kind of see throughout the film, it's kind of this subtle device where there's the Washburn photo and then there's the gyro-stabilized helicopter motion rendition, recreation of that photo that cuts from one to the other. And with the help of the Park Service, because this is all such massive terrain and you're not allowed to fly drones in the park. And the Park Service and John Leonard, the superintendent at the time, and everyone was such big fans of Washburn that part of our library was going around and matching a lot of his most famous photos where you could see the crazy glacial retreat and the changes of the landscape, which is not insignificant. So yeah, that's part of the library that I'm sure will get used in the future for some of that visual comparison research. And yeah, in a lot of cases, we were just recreating exactly the photo that Washburn took and trying to do it justice, which, yeah, I guess imitation is the best form of just, I forget what the phrase is exactly. But yeah, we were such fans at that point, as well as the Park Service, and it was a really magical couple sessions that we had traversing the range, not only documenting a lot of it like it had never been seen before with this gyro-stabilized camera system on the park rescue helicopter. It wasn't being used for rescues, but also just seeing the changes since when he first photographed them.
Was there a understanding of speaking of like high-tech stuff like that, I know that what you were physically wearing was also probably pretty different than what they were wearing. Just a lot has changed in the last half century. Were y'all aware, just knowing the historical perspective, like the difference in kit, literally what you had versus what they had in the same areas? And was there like a heightened level of respect after that? Talk about maybe some of those realizations.
Yeah, I think Brad was a planner, was kind of famous for his Lucania climb that we talk about in the film a little bit. And that's known as the sort of one of the original light and fast kind of go for broke, big mountain climbs. But that was really the exception to the rule for him. he was much more of a planner and a meticulous, like, let's bring 600 pounds of stuff to base camp kind of guy. He never had a single accident.
Wow.
With on any of his mountaineering trips. And, I think that speaks to, the kind of operation he was running.
Yeah. And when we did the recreations, we started to, research leather flight suits and things like that. And that was a cool exploration into like some of the older gear and like realizing how effective it was and its pitfalls, but also its strengths. But yeah, we definitely had a much easier time climbing with all the ultra lightweight modern gear, and it just gave us a lot more respect for what he was accomplishing. And you see how heavy the camera and the tripod they're carrying to the top of Denali is, which is still one of the harder climbs in the world. Yeah, it was no joke. The physical capability and just like grit and determination that he had, and Barbara and their whole teams.
I do see a similarity, Renan, though, because you bring a lot of shit on your expeditions too. And like, any Renan expedition, Mason, there's 10, 50-pound bags for all the camera gear. And so Renan might give Brad a run for his money there.
Yeah, it's kind of a counterintuitive thing. Like, all of us we weren't even filmmakers or photographers really mixed with climbing until the cameras got digital and really small. But then once we discovered the small cameras, we just wanted to risk ourselves and our physical capabilities, not just to climb the peak, but to carry bigger cameras up them. And yeah, you can see it in the film, whereas you have to pick the right partners for that, who are sort of down for the creative endeavor of making it harder just for the sake of documenting it at a higher level. And at a certain point, our buddy Zach just wasn't into that, which is totally fine. But yeah, there are points where he'd be on the traverse attempting it, and the leader goes out without a pack, and the follower carries the heavy pack, and I'd be out in the lead and look back, and Zach would find some big microphone in the pack that he's the guy who weighs every gram with tiny scales before you leave for the climb, and he just gives me a dirty look and keep climbing. And that, eventually fell apart for him, where he sort of fell out of love with the process that we were involved in trying to document this first ascent in the spirit of Washburn. And he just wanted to climb for the purity of it. And that's an interesting subplot in the theme and the intersection of it's an interesting subplot in the film with the intersection of just how professional climbing and the different forms of creativity are involved in these big endeavors. It's not the same for everyone. There's no right answer, and we're still great buddies with Zach, and he's killing it. And it's like has a family, and his joy revolves more around the art of flight with paragliding and windsurfing at the moment.
It is a balance. I am not someone that does a great job of documenting my trips, and there are many times where I wish I was, just to be able to share it in a better way. But when I attempt to, it doesn't go well. So I kind of leave it up to people like y'all to, I've been there. That's the place that I was telling you about. That's the thing I did. So I'm glad that there are folks out there that do find a lot of joy and passion, have a passion for that, because it's needed. You need to be able to see these things to, one, aspire to them yourself, and two, care about them, care about the conservation, care about history, and want to protect these places. So it's definitely a balance. I want to know too, this is such a daunting task. There's so much, serious energy. There's a lot of logistics. What's maybe one of the funniest situations on this whole experience of producing this film that y'all found yourselves in? Maybe it was on the climb itself or getting ready. Was there anything you look back on and say that was hilarious?
I was going to tell the story of like trying to do that recreation and we're trying to find like hemp rope to create the catch cradle that Brad tied himself up in to hang out the plane. And Taylor, our producer, is ordering stuff to our house. Like one day a package shows up from kink.com. And we're like, ooh, what's that going to be? And I guess she didn't know it at the time, but the hemp rope came from kink.com for the recreation.
That is funny. Golly. What about you, Freddie?
Yeah, I really a lot of hijinks, the recreations, and we forged a really nice relationship with the Museum of the North at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, who gets a shout out and a thank you. They, we went up there and they actually have a collection of Brad's 1930s mountaineering equipment, like preserved in their museum as like an archive for generations of people to come to understand how the first mountains were big mountains were climbed in Alaska. And that was really cool to go and talk to some of the folks who curate that. And then somehow we convinced them to let us borrow Brad's camera, which Brad had donated to the museum. And then like late in life, when he was kind of an older gentleman, he had gotten to this kerfuffle where he asked for the camera back. And the museum said, well, sir, it's in our archive. We need you to sign this paperwork or whatever to get your own camera back. Brad got all grumpy about it. And so there was already this hilarious story about it. And so they were like, well, we just want to make things right. And like, you know what? We feel like we can take a chance and we'll just loan you his camera. And so we sent our sort of our intern on like a 6-hour road trip from Talkeetna to Fairbanks to, sign out this 8 by 10-inch negative. And, he drove it back to us. And then that was an airplane as part of the shoot you see in the film. So a lot of things came together, but it was kind of, at different times, we definitely felt like Brad and Barbara's spirit was helping us along a little bit in making these things happen.
Too cool. They were, the museum's like, oh, we owe them one here. Go ahead and use it. We felt like it was undone from before. So that's awesome to be able to cash in on that IOU a little bit.
Yeah.
What was using the camera like? That's pretty interesting. Was it? I don't know. Did it feel like obsolete now, or was it like, wow, this is really something special to use?
We didn't actually shoot, negatives with it. Just sourcing the film and everything needed to shoot and develop would have been own rabbit hole to go down. So we didn't get to do that. But just doing those things, to me, it is really cool. It's a tangible connection.
So cool. That is awesome.
Yeah. Another story about birch bark canoes right now, I've been around North America for thousands of years, and I know about birch bark canoes, but I feel the same way about them, and I do large format aerial cameras, and they're very much, they still feel functional, man. Back in that era, they built things to last, and those things they're dated, but they don't feel really obsolete.
Yeah, Brad's camera was one of the coolest parts of the entire process, being able to handle that and shoot it in the air. We got some really special light up there and the whole viewfinder with the crosshairs and being able to point a lens through that and have the sun splintering through it above a sea of clouds at 14,000 feet above the range with Denali in the background was one of the most magical moments of the whole process, for sure.
Unbelievable. That is too cool. Wow. Yeah, just the historical aspect of this is so neat and so unique, I feel like, for a modern film. You were talking a little bit before about, films just being all about, adrenaline junkies, just kind of seeing that pop up. What are y'all noticing in the world of outdoor and mountaineering films, and how does this film fit in? Like, what kind of trends are you seeing, and are you hoping that this film either course corrects some of that focus, or do you see plenty of projects going on with amazing storytelling like this?
Well, yeah, I guess I'll go first on this one. I think more and more there's incredible films are popping up, not only in the adventure space, but in all different spaces, especially in the last few years, that are tackling like huge and important issues. And yeah, for us, it was a little tricky, not only with COVID, but just in the sense of this being a largely a film about, privileged white guys and exploration. Although Brad came from privilege, it's incredible to see what he did with it. And we hope that it kind of provides an example of how you can do adventure films that are focused more than just the conquering aspect. And maybe was like a risky maneuver on our part to go after this complicated dual narrative that had a lot of historical elements and didn't play up the suffering as much as a lot of some of the advisors had suggested. But at the same time, we're hoping that it helps answer that question of why you do it in the first place, which is the question that you can never answer in words in a form like this. And you kind of have to make something with music and visuals where you just kind of have to feel it. And yeah, that was our small contribution to that we hope will stand the test of time, and people can pull bits and pieces either from the modern adventure story part of it or the historical part of it as it lives its life out there in the metaverse, so to speak.
Yeah, one of the things about Sanctity of Space taking 10 years to make was that a whole generation of incredible, outdoor adventure documentary filmmakers kind of came of age. And there's been some incredible movies coming out, and a lot of them, are done by our friends or, we've been involved with, Jimmy and Renan making Meru, and, that came out, only 8 years ago now, but, that was huge. Free Solo, The Alpinist, though I'm just mentioning a few, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. There's been this kind of wave of documentary climbing films. And I think in a lot of ways that kind of hopefully that kind of creates some space for Sanctity of Space. In that there's a huge audience now of folks who are just into, good stories about mountains and adventure. And, I don't think we, even though, we had a very small theatrical release, I never really imagined that possible, when we started this project. So props to all our friends who have made those other films and kind of created this genre that's a real hotbed of creativity.
Love it. So awesome. Well, to wrap up, I'd love to ask y'all both one more question about the film. What do you think you learned through this 10-year process? One of the biggest lessons you've learned specifically from this project? And also, what are you hoping that the audience learns?
I mean, honestly, I think we're still learning. I think we definitely are starting to learn the benefit of kind of the long game with some of these stories, since this was over 10 years and there were ups and downs and sometimes question marks if we should proceed. And I think we learned that is, the satisfaction of actually finishing something that's so long and difficult and has so many parts to it. That's just sort of on a personal level. Obviously, the whole film itself was an exploration and learning into Brad's life. And when you're making like a film and collaborating with so many different artists, you're constantly learning through them. Just quick shout out to Logan, our composer, the incredible music, which is recorded live with the orchestra in Budapest. And that's always a process that's mind-blowing, that you learn so much about like the musical language. But I think in general, we just hope the audience takes away a little bit of the joy of climbing and the majesty of the Alaska Range. There's never going to be a perfect way to do it justice on camera. And there's always going to be the next greatest technology. And you really have to go up there and take a flight over the range, and you'll probably be brought to tears. But we hope that people take away a little bit of that emotion at certain points of the film, and some of the moments that we captured, combined with Brad's raspy voice guiding us through.
Yeah, everything Renan just said, and hopefully, this movie reminds everyone, and ourselves included, just to cherish those, partnerships and human bonds that you forge and maintain through adventure and exploration, however it fits into your life. And that's kind of a big message of like Brad's life. He says it, much better than I just did in the film. But, when you're lying on your deathbed, you're probably going to remember, like, who were those people you were with when you were, camped out on the glacier and, a week of bad weather, way back when you did that expedition, or, who was your buddy you did that road trip with to go climbing for the summer. Those are probably the things that you're really going to carry with you, or so I've been told. So
fantastic, y'all. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on the film and just some of the reflections. I know it's out right now. We're going to point to folks where they can find it. But is there a particular place you want folks to watch over another?
I'd say it'd be nice to bump up our status in the charts on iTunes specifically, since it'd be fun to take down the Jackasses at number one, the Jackass Forever movie. That would, in terms of the juxtaposition between adrenaline-fueled antics and kind of this deeper exploration into the ethos of adventure, that would be a good case study. So I'm curious to see how that plays out. So I'd probably point people towards iTunes.
iTunes it is.
Yeah, let's take down Jackass. I mean, it's a reflective, inspiring work as well, but definitely of our generation, and we'll probably go down in history. But yeah, totally. I think your movie's a little more insightful for sure. But well, awesome, y'all. Well, thanks for jumping on, and thanks for the work you do. And I'm looking forward to get it out there to the world a little bit more through our audience. So yeah, have a great day, have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thanks for having us, Mason.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Mason. Nice to meet you.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.
Live life at your pace. Click the banner or go to visitwilliamsburg.com to discover how. Because here in Williamsburg, life moves at one pace, yours. Here, our waters are splashing and rejuvenating. Our history is for seeing and experiencing. Our theme parks are for riding and sometimes flying. And our great outdoors are yours for exploring and restoring. It's all waiting for you in Williamsburg. Book your trip today and live life at your pace.
This summer, LL Bean invites you to simply step outside and enjoy the fresh air and sunshine. We'll be your guide with tips and advice to get more out of every moment outdoors. Here's one. Next time you go camping, add some zip to the zippers on your tent by rubbing them with wax. Goodbye noisy, sticky zippers. Hello, smooth pulling gear. For more fun ideas, easy how-tos, and inspiring stories, visit llbean.com/guide.